Welcome back. It is exactly 9:18. News and views right here on Salam Media. And our next guest comes from an educational background. She was a teacher. She was also a radio station host for a good few years, and she served a long stint in government. She has gone on to start up her own business called the Barefoot Facilitator. She will tell us a little bit about that. But more importantly, she's going to be talking about transforming Slovo, a community perspective on informal settlements. Now, the reason I have her on the show this morning is you might have noticed, if you are a regular listener and viewer, that this is a very hard-hitting news and views program, and I've decided to introduce community leaders and also showcase human stories, and also showcase the fact that in all of the madness and the turmoil that we go through on a day-to-day basis, COVID, world wars, corruption, everything else that's happening around us, that there's a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel, that there are amazing angels out there doing their bit, putting back into their community, uplifting people and making a meaningful difference. One such person is Rehana Moosajee, founder of the Barefoot Facilitator. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program. Great having you on the show this morning.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Julie, and thank you for having me. And I think your introduction is so apt because it is so easy to be distracted by the noise of what's not working. And yet, I think we each have the agency to do something in the immediate vicinities that we live in, the communities that we belong to. And we are able to make a difference with minimal resources, and transforming Slovo is exactly that kind of story.
Just imagine, and I'm going to ask you to unpack this because you've been an activist from a very tender age, and you've gone on and you are still very, very active, making a difference in a way which is best for the community that you live in. Just imagine, Rehana, if each and every one of us as citizens could do our little bit, what a transformed society we'd have. How did you start up, and what sort of a difference are you making? I also know that you've published a report. Unfortunately, I don't have it to hand, but we will go through that as well, inshallah.
So, Julie, firstly, just to indicate that the report is available both on the Slovo Community Youth Desk website as well as the Barefoot Facilitator website. It is on the front page of the Barefoot Facilitator website at the moment. The report is called Transforming Slovo, and it's not so much my story, Julie, but it's really, I think, in the wisdom of the Creator, how people are brought together in the midst of adversity. So the report actually starts off with an old photograph of my daughter when she was 3 years old, Fahima, 1999. And we had some guests from a Nordic country at the place I was working at. And I had taken them to Slovo. And I think fast forward to 2020, COVID arrives, and I'm in conversation with my gardener who lives at Slovo and trying to get materials printed, just to alert the community on some of the safety aspects. But of course, like, it's pretty ludicrous to tell anyone in an informal settlement to social distance, given the conditions that people live under. And really, the Transforming Slovo report, Julie, is a story through COVID and in COVID of 4 young gentlemen from Slovo informal settlement that borders Crosby and Coronationville, or is in between Crosby and Coronationville, who come together to imagine what their space that they live in could look like, and to identify what their biggest challenges are. And I think what's interesting in that conversation, so Julie, I think I've been on other shows of yours before, the news slot, where we've discussed kind of, handing over a soccer ball, what that has meant to a group of young kids and so forth. But in this instance, this group of young men build a model to identify the biggest challenges in their community. And one would expect that if you're living in an informal settlement, your biggest challenge you would cite is, I want housing.
Wow.
Interestingly, that's not what they identify. They identify, and I was listening to the ad in the break before we came on. They identify leaking water taps, illegal electricity connections, poor sanitation, teenage pregnancy, substance abuse, crime. Crime within the informal settlement, Julie, is a big issue. And so they kind of identify these issues, and then the Barefoot Facilitator, in the midst of COVID, we make some modest resources of seeds and implements available to the team to start doing a bit of farming on or veg gardening on a space across from the container. But then, we through my work, we become aware of a fund that they can apply for, and we do that. It's called the South African Cities Network Integrated Urban Development Fund, which is a modest amount for seed funding for ideas that communities have for their own development and for the urban agenda. Uh, so it becomes apparent when they have to apply. It's a simple Google form, but they don't have access to data to fill in the
Ah,
Google form. So eventually they come over to my house. I have a spare laptop laying around. I make the laptop available to them. They use my Wi Fi. They put in the application, and alhamdulillah, they are successful, not by virtue of the fact that they know me and I do work with the SACN. They are successful of their own accord, and they are given an amount of 50,000 Rand, which, we open a bank account for. And Julie, I want to tell you a little bit about what this team have accomplished with 50,000 Rand. So for 3 months, so in the team of four, one of them is employed. And so they agree that kind of he's not going to be covered by any stipend from that money. Three of them, for a period of 4 months, get a stipend of 1,500 Rand each. And they share, Julie, they choose to share their stipend with other community members who volunteer on the project. They replaced 10 toilets with
you.
their own hands that had been vandalized in the community. They are not qualified plumbers. They Google, they figure this thing out, and they replace the toilets, and they bring some dignity to the sanitation block in their community.
Wow.
They have a little bit of money left over. GIS has a container in the community, but it's kind of had windows broken and so forth. They paint the container. And then I'm telling this, they replace window panes again, all with their own labor. They do their own shopping. They budget with the money they have around what's the most cost-effective way to do this. And I tell the story to a colleague of mine who's into solar, who's installed solar at my home. And I explained to him about, we have this laptop, but these guys don't have access to electricity. It's the digital divide. It's exacerbating their poverty. And Sunny's like, I'll donate. Just from the openness of his heart, donates a solar system to put into the container. So now we have a solar powered container to work
Wow.
from in an informal settlement. And Sunny is just amazing. He's got an amazing network of people, and we start chatting to our respective networks, and people just arrive, Julie. People from my WhatsApp street group kind of want to hear more about this. And suddenly we have a phenomenal team, including my friend Mufida Jaffar's son, Naweed Khan, who's an IT specialist, my own son, Adil, a couple of other IT specialists, and they come together and we start conceiving with this team in Slovo about the creation of a digital skills hub. A number of people, Adil, Naweed, Sunny goes to Ziyad at Communica, and we get donations of Raspberry Pis, we buy some screens, we buy some mouse pads and so forth. And we launch a digital skills hub, solar powered digital skills hub in the midst
Wow.
of an informal settlement. And that just opens up a new world for
Absolutely.
this community.
All
So yeah,
right.
and then
Okay.
this report has a lot more detail about other stuff we've done.
Obviously. Who's it targeted at? Are you hoping by way of this report, possibly government can come on board, other NPOs, other NGOs, and obviously this model can be replicated at informal settlements throughout the country, thereby upskilling youth and making them more employable. So, talk to us about that. And what else? I know that you also have some sort of a sporting facility going as well, or a sporting initiative. Talk to us about that as well, if you don't mind.
Okay, so Julie, I think the report is really intended for development practitioners, for academics, and at the report launch, it was amazing. We had someone from Mashhad in Iran join us. We had colleagues from Wits University joining us, and who were very intrigued by the story. So, of course, every informal settlement is not Slovo, but every informal settlement has its own dynamics, and I think the report is very instructive on the kind of attention to detail, the kind of relationship building that needs to happen, the kind of networks that those of us who have access to networks can bring to bear on communities who might not be able to access those networks of their own accord. So, would encourage people who are in the development space, who are in the financing space, to read the report and see how it resonates with them. Julie, in terms of the sports initiative, what actually is the case is that I live across from the park, and if you read the report, you'll see that in many ways the kind of park project that I'm working on as the Barefoot Facilitator and the Slovo project are interlinked. And on this park is an indoor sports center run by Uncle Yusuf Taraj. He calls himself Papa Joe. And so we're also having a conversation about how he can make that facility more available to residents in Slovo. A couple of weeks ago, we had a visit from Gibbs with their Spirit of Youth facilitators, completely blown away by a young girl by the name of Tokelo Sidibe, who lives at Slovo, attends Coronationville Secondary, grade 9, comes up with all A's in all subjects at the end of
Wow.
last year, Julie. And so I think the other thing that's instructive for me, I mean, it's very easy. Well, it's not easy. I think it's commendable when people do relief work and charitable work from a distance. I think the difference with transforming Slovo is the extent to which the relationship between the Barefoot Facilitator and my network and the community or this grouping at Slovo has grown. Actually, at the end of Jan, took this group out for a one-day learning about leading event that I hosted and gifted as the Barefoot Facilitator to Taba Eco Hotel. Things we take for granted, Julie, around access to transport, to get to spaces. When you work in these kinds of contexts, you realize just how much we have that we take for granted. Spaces to meet in, spaces to have quiet conversations in. I think transforming Slovo hasn't only been about transforming Slovo as a space. It's also transformed the Barefoot Facilitator in deepening our understanding of what it means to work in community and with community. And I think importantly, to unleash the agency of people to do things for themselves. People have the capacity to do things for themselves. And how do you support that without dictating to people what you think their priorities should be?
Okay, two things before we wrap up, Rehana, is I just want you to give me a snapshot of what the Barefoot Facilitator is all about, what type of work you do there, how did this come about, and of course the all-important question, living in South Africa with crime rates being so high, people who are wanting to replicate your model, I think top of the head would be, I'm going into an informal settlement. Am I going to be safe? Whatever it is that I invest there for the benefit of the people there, will it be safe? Will it not be vandalized, etc.? So over to you.
Okay, so Julie, the Barefoot Facilitator, I really do work in process facilitation, so meetings, events, but helping to design a very different way for people to talk and be authentic in their conversations with each other. So we do work, with the South African Cities Network, with the CSIR, with the Presidential Employment Stimulus Program, predominantly public sector, a bit of private sector. So, Julie, let me say that the report indicates very clearly that not everything that we've done at Slovo has been a phenomenal success. I think it's been a learning experience. My greatest desire was to create a public space at Slovo because I talk about these things in theory in the work I do and the sessions I facilitate. And, you do kind of EU, SDGs, leave no one behind. And I think the work at Slovo is a practical experiment with the things people talk about in theory on multilateral and development forums. And so we installed some beautiful artificial turf, which again, the Barefoot Facilitator had gifted to the community. And I must say, the community leaders who I'm working with did say to me, "Mums, don't put this in, it's going to get stolen." Of course, I didn't want to listen, Julie. I was like, guys, we have to experiment because we have to bring some beauty. Living in poverty
Right.
doesn't mean you have to live in ugliness and filth and so forth. And so we installed it. And of course, lo and behold, the next morning, they sent me a message to say one whole piece of artificial turf is gone. So I think, Julie, the reality. So let me tell you, the day we launched the Digital Skills Hub, it was pouring down with rain. And I had like Ashraf Garda from Champion South Africa was one of the people who had RSVP to attend the launch, and the chairperson of the Informal Settlement Network in South Africa. And I got up in the morning and I was like, what do I do? And then I was like, no, Rehana, just be real. Those people, when it rains, they can't run away from Slovo. So if your guests have to deal with a bit of rain and some mud, that's what's going to happen. And so we did. And Julie, I just want to come back to the crime issue because it has been so instructive for me that last week I needed Given, who is one of the protagonists that you will read about in the report, to drive me to Pilanesberg for some urgent work. And it had to be an overnight trip, and it was very last minute. And he said to me, now I would assume that if I'm saying to someone, I'm taking Given, who lives in an informal settlement, into a 5-star lodge in the Pilanesberg, and he's going to have an opportunity to spend a night there, that he would be overjoyed at the prospect. His first consideration was, we can go, but then I'm going to need to move some of my valuables out of my shack for the night.
Oh,
Because if I'm not sleeping there tonight, my stuff is not safe. So the assumption that everyone who lives in informality in some way or form is a perpetrator of criminal acts rather than possibly the receiving end and more vulnerable than you and I. There is no alarm, there is no electric fence, there is none of the protection that some of us have the luxury of. Julie, I think we have to stop talking inequality and the divide and begin to bridge the divides and understand each other's worlds. And all that people want is for the best chance for themselves and their children in their lives.
absolutely. And on that note, we're going to have to leave it there. Rehana, amazing. Undoubtedly, it has inspired me. And as you were speaking, I've been kicking myself here because you've always extended invitations to me to attend, and I never have ever attended. But I promise the next time around I'm going to attend, and I think, inshallah, can also become a part of something that I can be involved in and make a difference, however small it might be, but touch people's lives in a positive way. May Allah
Would
be
love
with
to have
you.
you, inshallah, Julie. Can I hold you to
May,
that one?
absolutely. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of your amazing efforts. I admire you. You're amazing. And inshallah, I hope by way of this interview, a lot of people start replicating what you've done. Go well. Assalamu alaikum. Until the next time, as always, Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz, Julie. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Moosajee, the Barefoot Facilitator, talking to us about her involvement at the Slovo Park here in Johannesburg between Crosby and Coronationville. 9:38 exactly. News and views right here on Slovo.